So we're ready.
Okay, Ms. McCauley, would you like to take over at this point?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Gordon, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, Mr. Gordon, have you discussed this this hearing with your attorney, Ms. Hawkins?
Yes.
And have you discussed with her appearing via Zoom versus appearing in person in court?
Yes.
Okay, and you understand that you have the right to appear in court, but you are in fact waiving that right and agreeing to appear via Zoom for the purposes of this motion only.
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much. And just to be clear, Mr. Gordon, you waive any and all confrontation clause objections that you would have appearing via Zoom for this purposes of this hearing only, correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Your Honor, the state is satisfied that Mr. Gordon has successfully waived his rights.
All right, on this motion for immunity, I'm assuming that the defense goes first. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor. They have the burden.
Okay, Ms. Hawkins, would you like to proceed?
Yes, Judge. I see that Mr. Fountain is on the Zoom call. I, one, would like him muted. And then two, I would like him sequestered, I guess, put in a breakout room so he can't hear the testimony of other individuals at the time.
All right, the defense has invoked the rule of sequestration. From a technological point of view, I'm going to now figure that out. If anybody would like to give me any advice on that, I would be happy because I think he has to accept a breakout.
He does, Your Honor. I don't have any objection to Mr. Fountain being moved into the breakout room. Actually, I would like to be moved into the breakout room just momentarily to speak with Mr. Fountain to explain what's going on. And then we can proceed with the hearing.
Okay, let me just see how I can do that. I'm going to do Mr. Kevin Fountain, and I'm going to do Ms. Lauren McCauley. At this point, has your invitation appeared?
No.
Okay.
Here it is.
I invited
That's Joy.
Okay. What do I do now?
When Lauren is done, she's going to be able to leave the breakout room and come back and join us.
Have I put Mr. Fountain in the breakout room?
Yes, you have, Judge.
Okay. I'm going to practice up on that, guys.
Okay, Judge, both Mr. Fountain and actually Mr. Fairburn, both of my witnesses are in the breakout room. So I'm ready to proceed at this point.
Okay, so the court accepts on the record the representation made by the state, which I appreciate, that witnesses subject to sequestration, of course, that would be the same if there are any defense witnesses, are in a technological breakout room, meaning not able to view the proceedings as they are going forward. So that representation is specifically made by the court. Would you like to proceed, Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, I would like to call Mr. Darius Stroud.
All right, Mr. Stroud is present. He's on is this going to be your first witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Stroud, can you see me? Would you raise your right hand? Mr. Stroud, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give in the matter now pending before this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, you may put your hand down. Proceed, Ms. Hawkins. And I think if you don't mind asking him his name and how to spell it.
Yes. Mr. Stroud, what is your first and last name?
It is Darius, Darius, Stroud, Stroud.
Thank you. How are you doing this morning?
I'm making it this morning.
That's good. I have a couple background questions for you. How old are you?
I'm 35.
And what do you do for a living?
I'm a correction officer for the state of Georgia.
You said a correction officer?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And do you know Mr. Ronaldo Gordon?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you know him?
He's a friend.
Do you know Kevin Fountain?
Yes, ma'am.
How do you know him?
At one point, he was a friend also.
You said at one point, are you all not friends now?
With everything that went on, we kind of went separate ways.
Okay. And do you know Mr. Conrad Fambro?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Hawkins, I'm sorry, could he repeat his answer?
Mr. Stroud, I asked you,
Well, you're not friends anymore.
are you not friends anymore? And I need your answer again.
Oh, I said not at this time. We kind of decided to go separate ways.
Okay. And do you know Mr. Conrad Fambro?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you know him?
Through Mr. Fountain.
Okay. So based on your recollection, when you all were friends and hanging around each other, how big, I guess, height and weight would you consider Mr. Kevin Fountain?
I'm about 5'11", 235, 240.
And how about Mr. Fambro?
I'm about 5'9", probably 202, probably 197, 202.
Okay. And at the time, well, from your memory, when you were hanging around Mr. Ronaldo Gordon before he was arrested, how big would you say he was?
I'll say he probably was probably like 187 to probably like 215.
So smaller than Mr. Fountain.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. On December 30th, 2019, where were you living?
806 Magnolia Way, Atlanta, Georgia, 30314, apartment 203.
Who, if anybody, was living with you at that location?
At that time, it was my best friend, Keith Freeman. And Mr. Ronaldo Ray.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part.
Mr. Ronaldo Ray.
Is that Mr. Gordon?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you recall the evening of December 30th, 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
And on that evening,
Sorry, give me that date again, Ms. Hawkins. I apologize.
December 30th, 2019.
Great, thank you.
No problem. And did you have guests in your home?
At that time, it was me and Mr. Gordon and a friend, Mr. I don't know his last name offhand. His name is Philip. But we was all sitting here just talking, just a regular, normal day. And next thing you know, I get a knock at the door, and it was an unannounced, uh, like, show up from Mr. Fountain. Normally he'll call and let me know he's on his way over, or we can
I'm
go.
sorry, from whom?
Mr. Kevin Fountain.
Mr. Fountain, okay.
Yes, and this particular day, I didn't get a phone call. I just, got a knock at the door, and it was him at the door. And you can tell that he came with some type of tendency to a bad vibe. I can say that. He came in aggressively.
Okay. And I'm sorry, remind me again, when Mr. Fountain came in, or when he knocked at the door, who was all present in the home?
Myself, Mr. Gordon, and one of my other friends, Mr. Phillip.
Okay. And you said you all were all in the home, just talking, hanging around, just a normal evening.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When Mr. Fountain knocked on the door, did you let him in?
Yes, because I answered the door because I didn't know who it was. I was like, normally a company would call me and let me know where I'm about to come by. Is it okay if I stop by, this and that? And it was out of the norm that, this person just came and knocked at the door. So when I opened the door, I invited him in, but I just kind of felt it was kind of weird.
Okay. So after you let him in, does he join the conversation with everyone? What happens?
He joins in the conversation, but then it seems like he was directing his questions and frustration towards Mr. Gordon. And I was basically trying to figure out like what's going on. It seemed like it's animosity. And that's when they had a physical altercation. It went from words to physical altercation where I actually separated them. I actually escorted Mr. Gordon to a separate room. I also escorted Mr. Fountain out of my front door.
Okay. And you said it went from a verbal altercation to a physical altercation, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And who initiated the verbal altercation?
Mr. Fountain initiated the verbal altercation. It was like with us, me, Philip, and Mr. Gordon sitting having a conversation. Like I said, normally Mr. Fountain would call me and let me know, like, is it okay if I stop by? I'm in the area, this and that. But this particular day, he just showed up. So it was just like kind of weird. And like the conversation we was having, just having a broad conversation. And it was like once he got there, it was like he came with some type of vendetta.
Okay. And who initiated the physical contact?
Mr. Fountain actually initiated that.
And how did he do that?
He actually pushed Mr. Gordon in the back.
What was Mr. Gordon's response to that push?
At the time, it was, I guess, to defend himself in the home.
And how did he? I'm sorry. Can you finish? I'm sorry. I thought you were finished.
I said, I guess it was to actually defend itself, and the time in his place of residency.
I'm sorry. Say that again, please.
He said
I
he
get-
defended himself in his place of residency.
Okay.
So what did he use to defend himself?
His actually is bare hands.
So you said you escorted Mr. Gordon into another room and you escorted Mr. Fountain to the front door.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sorry. So did that end the incident with Mr. Fountain being gone and Mr. Gordon being in another room?
No, it didn't. When I actually separated Mr. Gordon by putting him in the bedroom that is located on the other side of the apartment, I escorted Mr. Fountain out of the house. But in the process of escorting him out of the house, he placed a phone call to Conrad, basically stating he was, oh, they jumped me.
Objection,
And
hearsay.
no,
Hang on, Ms. Hawkins.
Mr. Stroud, you can't say what someone else said.
Well, hearing no exceptions to the hearsay rule, the court sustains the objection.
Okay, so he placed a phone call to Mr. Conrad Fountain. Okay, so could you, without telling me what he actually said, could you hear Mr. Fountain actually speaking to Mr. Conrad Fambro?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how long after calling Mr. Fambro did Mr. Fountain stay in your presence?
After the conversation what he was having, and I escorted him out of the apartment. Not even 5 minutes. That's when I closed my door, and I'm thinking like everything's okay.
When does things become not okay?
Um, After I, basically escort Mr. Fountain out of my apartment, I pulled Mr. Gordon out of my bedroom on the other side of the house. And I basically, I was just basically telling him, just calm down, it'll be all right. And while in the midst of that, my front door get kicked in. And the only persons that I see, I have a dog. So he's on the defense mode. So at the point of my door getting kicked in, he's becoming the aggressor of defending the household.
Hold on. And when you say he, who are you talking about?
This is my dog.
Okay, carry on.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what he said. This is my what?
Dog.
My dog, okay.
Okay, I'm sorry, you can go ahead.
But as we were just sitting, just basically, I was telling him, just calm down, everything will be all right, whatever. And all of a sudden, my front door just gets kicked in. My pictures come out the wall. My decor that I have, it was damaged due to the point Mr. Frambro and Mr. Fountain came in with a vendetta.
Objection, speculation.
Ms. Hawkins,
Can testify. Oh, sorry.
any response?
I think he's testifying to present sense impression.
Okay, well, testify as to what he actually saw. And I speculate what may have been on someone else's mind.
Oh, well, I understand, Your Honor.
To that extent, I'll sustain it.
Well, in that situation, I see two people enter my home unannounced, and basically come to, well, they came and they attacked Mr. Gordon in my home, in his place of residency.
And when you say they attacked, it was both Mr. Fountain and Mr. Fambro who attacked him?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that point, when they kicked in your door, did Mr. Gordon provoke Mr. Fountain?
No, ma'am. When they came in, they basically came right towards, like, to going towards him.
And when they were attacking him, what, if anything, did you see them attacking Mr. Gordon with?
Like I said, when you first walk into my house, I have decors and pictures. My picture was torn off the wall. I have a candle. I have a large candle stand around this size glass. Mr. Frambro grabbed it and actually started to proceed and hit. Well, he did. He made contact with Mr. Gordon several times.
With the glass candle holder?
Yes, ma'am.
What did Mr. Fountain use in his attack against Mr. Gordon?
His hands.
Okay. So there's two people attacking Mr. Gordon. You have to say yes or no.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Gordon is who is fighting alongside Mr. Gordon?
No one, because I'm actually trying to break it up, and it became to the point that other people that came with them was outside, so I actually had to call the police. I called 911 because they wouldn't leave after I separated this on the second time.
And what was Mr. Gordon during this second altercation? What was Mr. Gordon using to defend himself?
His bare hands.
At any point, did you see Mr. Gordon use any other body part to defend himself? Any other of his own body parts to defend himself?
No, ma'am. Only thing I seen was hands made contact with the other person's body, and kind of like shielding himself when they actually both attacked him.
Okay. In your opinion, was this a fair fight?
No, ma'am.
Objection. Ultimate issue.
The ultimate issue is self-defense. And was it a fair fight? Maybe subjective for a lot of reasons, but I don't think it's the ultimate issue as to whether it was a fair fight. So from that standpoint, overruled on that basis.
Thank you. Mr. Stroud, who had the disadvantage?
Objection. Ultimate issue. That goes to self-defense, Your Honor.
Who had the advantage? Again, I think for everyone's benefit, this witness can say what he saw, what he sensed, And then the conclusions from it would be drawn by the trier of fact. So keep going.
Mr. Stroud, who had the disadvantage?
At the time.
Again, I think to that extent, again, I'm not so certain that's the ultimate issue. Again, I think he can testify as to what he saw.
Mr. Stroud, in your opinion, and based on what you saw, who was at a disadvantage?
Mr. Gordon.
When you said you called 911, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And when did the police arrive?
They arrived.
When the police arrived, who all was present in the home?
Me and Mr. Gordon.
Where was Mr. Fountain and Mr. Fambro?
As soon as I said I was calling the police, and I actually did call the police, they actually ran downstairs and got in their car.
Okay. And based on what you saw, who started the whole ordeal?
Mr. Fountain.
No further questions.
All right, thank you. Any cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Stroud. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Mr. Stroud, you testified that there's approximately about a 20-pound difference between Mr. Fountain and Mr. Gordon. Would that be accurate?
At that time, yeah, probably. Yes.
Okay. And there's about an inch in height difference?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You would agree that's not really a significant physical difference between two individuals, two grown men. Correct?
I kind of beg a difference on that.
So you think 20-pound difference between two grown adult men and an inch of height is a significant difference?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm at court.
Okay.
I'm in court with your mom.
Ms. Barnes, could you please mute your microphone?
My apologies.
You're okay. Okay, and how long have you been a corrections officer?
14 and a half years.
And what do you do in the Department of Corrections exactly?
I'm a correctional sergeant. I'm a supervisor for over 1,500 inmates, mental health.
At what facility?
Phillips State Prison.
Okay, Phillips State Prison.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how long have you known Mr. Gordon?
Over 2 years now.
For 2 years now. So you knew him in September of 2019?
Yes, ma'am.
And you're familiar with an individual by the name of, let's see, Jermaine Day?
Jermaine. I didn't hear the last name.
Oh, Day, Stephanie, Day, D-A-Y.
No, ma'am. I've heard of the name, but don't know them personally.
Okay,
Objection.
so
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
I think it goes to the witness's bias and his familiarity with the defendant.
I'm gonna overrule the objection because if there's, I think you're entitled to make some type of proffer, but I'm gonna overrule it at this time.
And did you ever visit Mr. Gordon at 257 Skipple Terrace?
No, ma'am.
Okay, how long has he lived with you at the Magnolia Way address?
Almost a year.
Almost a year? And you did not know or acquaint yourself with an individual by the name of Jermaine Day?
Okay, yes, I remember. Okay, the name sounds familiar now.
Okay, and how are you familiar with Mr. Day?
They was companions.
Companions, okay. Were you present for an incident that happened between the two of them in September of 2019?
No, ma'am.
Objection. Relevance.
I think it goes to the witness's familiarity and truthfulness, Your Honor.
I think we're getting into character evidence of Mr. Gordon.
I'm not going to go any further into that incident, Your Honor.
Okay. I mean, relevance as to credibility can be, you know, did you cheat on your SATs? And that's not the least bit relevant. So just bear in mind, this is a real live hearing. Keep going.
Okay. So going to the incident December 30th of 2019, how long had you known Mr. Fountain at that point?
Mr. Fountain and I, probably 6 months.
And how did you know Mr. Fountain? How did you come to be friends with him?
We actually met online, and he said that he was fairly new to Atlanta. And we basically started cooking meals at each other's house, playing spades, from one house to the other. So it was like a connection that kind of like a friendship, an early friendship.
Like a social group almost.
Yes.
Okay. And so Mr. Fountain shows up to your house, and when you answered the door, he came unannounced. When you answered the door, he was visibly upset. You would say that?
Yes.
Yeah, there was I think you said that there was a bad vibe coming from him. Would that be accurate?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at that point, you invited him into your residence?
Yes.
Okay. Did you talk to him about why he was upset before you let him in?
No, because basically what we was normally we always just talk about any and everything. So basically, if we have a problem, we'll just talk about it in the little circle that we normally have.
Okay. So, I mean, clearly he was upset. You invited him in, and you were thinking that you were all going to discuss what was going on as a group.
Yes.
And at that point, he actually engaged a verbal altercation with Mr. Gordon.
Yes, ma'am.
Airing his grievances. Would that be a fair way to describe what transpired, the verbal altercation?
When you say his grievances?
Mr. Fountain was expressing to Mr. Gordon why he was upset.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And it turned into a physical altercation at that point. Would that be correct?
After that's kind of.
So let me rephrase the question, Mr. Stroud. There was a verbal altercation that ensued between Mr. Fountain and Mr. Gordon, and then that escalated into a physical altercation between the two.
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Fountain came by himself at that point?
No, he had some female I've never seen before.
Oh, so there was a female present?
Yes.
Okay. And where was she during this altercation?
Sitting in the chair.
So she was sitting in a chair. Okay. Did you attempt to intervene into the physical altercation or the verbal altercation?
Yes. I actually, basically when they started getting to the point of the verbalness, and I basically, calm down, chill out, like what's going on. When it got to the physical altercation, I put my body in between both and separated, placing Mr. Gordon in the room and placing Mr. Fountain on the outside of the door.
Okay. And did you call the police at that point?
No, ma'am.
And it's your testimony that you were trying to calm down Mr. Gordon when Mr. Fountain and then Mr. Fambro, his companion, kicked in the front door.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And at that point, did you call the police?
Yes, ma'am.
You called the police when they kicked in the front door?
Yes, ma'am.
Or did you call the police after they started having a second physical altercation?
After when the police was called after the second time I separated them, and I placed Mr. Gordon in the inside because they dragged him on the outside of the apartment.
And did you see him, did you see the physical altercation that took place outside the apartment?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you see Mr. Gordon bite Mr. Fountain's ear?
No, ma'am.
Did you see the blood coming from Mr. Fountain?
I seen blood at the point when Mr. Frambro was swinging my lantern.
But you did not see Mr. Gordon bite Mr. Fountain.
No, ma'am.
Would you consider biting someone's ear to be an acceptable means of defending oneself?
Objection.
Well,
I think that goes to the.
I am going to intervene here because I think he said he didn't see it. So if the question in general is, do you think that's a good thing? I don't think we have the context.
Well, Mr. Gordon or Mr. Stroud has testified that he believed Mr. Gordon to have a disadvantage and that it was not a fair fight. So I'm asking him what he would think would be a fair fight, I guess. I'll rephrase the question.
Right.
Mr. Stroud, you were not involved in a physical altercation that occurred between Mr. Gordon, Mr. Fambro, and Mr. Fountain, correct? Other than observing it and trying to break it up.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you were not outside with them when they were physically fighting?
I was.
You were outside. You were involved in the fight?
Not involved, separating.
You were separating. Okay. Did you see every swing that happened between all the parties?
I really can't say I've seen all because when you're separating a fight, you're basically trying to disengage one to the other. So I can't say that my eyes were basically trying to see every hand punch or every swing that he was throwing.
Okay. So unlike a referee in an MMA fight or a boxing match, you weren't watching every punch that went back and forth between the parties. There may have been times when your back was turned, when you were trying to separate different individuals. Would that be a correct statement, Mr. Stroud?
Mr. Stroud, can you hear us, sir?
He might be frozen.
Uh-oh.
It looks a little frozen.
Okay, there.
Okay, you're back. Can you hear me okay, Mr. Stroud?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think you froze for just a second. Let me ask you the question again, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
So unlike a referee in a boxing match or an MMA fight who can call every puncher and every kick between the parties, okay? You were trying to separate everyone, and there was times when you were more focused on separating someone than the actual blows that were going on between the parties. Would that be a fair statement?
That's kind of a yes or no, because it's a point of when everything that was going on with the fight, the swinging of the lantern, my concern was to make sure, because Mr. Gordon was at a disadvantage of actually two people that was basically jumping him. At that point, my main concern was making sure that he was okay, making sure that I can disengage him and get him to a safer place. At the same time, when I did that, that's when I proceeded to call the police. I called the police.
Okay, Mr. Stroud, I want you to listen to what the question that I'm asking you is, okay? Mm-hmm. The question that I'm asking you is, it would be a fair statement to say that while this physical altercation was occurring, you were trying to separate the parties, you were trying to disengage, and you did not see every swing that happened between Mr. Fambro, Mr. Fountain, and Mr. Gordon. Would that be correct?
Like I said, with that question, it's kind of iffy, because the thing of it is, I can't sit there and say that I've seen every single punch and blow. Okay. I can only say what I've seen with my own two eyes. Okay. And that's a person basically defended themselves from being jumped for two people.
Motion to strike, witness's response. He just testified to the ultimate issue.
Your Honor, I disagree. I think that given
And his answer was non-responsive to the question.
I was gonna ask as to whether there was unresponsiveness. So
he did respond, Your Honor. I think he just elaborated.
Okay, Ms. McCauley, what part do you want to strike?
The part after he says, no, I did not see every strike that happened between the parties. And then he goes into the description of what he observed or says he observed.
Your Honor, I believe he was explaining why he didn't see every punch and every.
I'm gonna overrule the motion to strike. I think he was answering the question. And you got him on cross-examination. You're entitled to a thorough and sifting cross-examination, but he's entitled to explain his answer. Okay, next question.
And so I just want to go through exactly what you've just testified to, Mr. Stroud, because it's a little bit different than your direct examination. So the first incident happened inside the apartment. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and inside the apartment, you separated the parties when the altercation became physical. You put Mr. Gordon into your bedroom and you put Mr. Fountain outside the front door.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and then at that point, you were attempting to calm Mr. Gordon down. You did not call 911. You did not call the police, and that's when your front door got kicked in.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and when your front door got kicked in, the altercation ensued inside the apartment, or was it outside the apartment?
It started inside of the apartment, in the hallway of my apartment.
Okay, so it started inside of your apartment in the hallway.
I'd ask that that Ms. McCauley let Mr. Stroud finish his answers.
Ms. McCauley, I don't know that you knew it, but I don't think he had finished his answer.
Okay.
The altercation started when they entered, or when they kicked down my front door. When they came in, they snatched my pictures, snatched my lantern from the side of the counter. The altercation began then. The altercation began when they started when they dragged him on the outside of the apartment. That's when, everything else transpired. Me trying to separate, me calling the police.
Okay. So they snatched your pictures, and the glass candle holder incident between Mr. Fambro and Mr. Gordon occurred where?
The picture and the glass lantern?
I believe you testified on direct that it was a glass candle holder.
Yes. I can show you a picture of it if you like.
No, it's okay. Is it a lantern or is it a candle holder?
It's both.
Okay. So that's the same item.
Yes. Yeah. If any way I can show a picture of the lantern, it's just I'm missing the largest one.
It's okay, Mr. Shaw. I'm just trying to, because when you said on direct it was a glass candle holder, and now you're describing it as a lantern, I understand now that those things are interchangeable, that they're the same item.
Okay. No, Your Honor, is there any way that I can show you the actual picture? Well, the actual lantern. I'm missing. It's 3 of them, and I'm basically missing the largest one.
Okay, well, let's not do that. We're ironically talking about the introduction of evidence that people can't really touch, see, talk about. And so we're just going to focus on you with the camera pointed at you as we have been. So let's not pan around right now. Thank you, though. Go ahead, Ms. McCauley.
All right. So there was a glass candle holder lantern that Mr. Fambro had. And when he was striking Mr. Gordon with that, was that inside the apartment or outside the apartment?
It was both, inside and out.
Okay. So he had a glass candle holder lantern in his hand when he dragged Mr. Gordon out of the apartment?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And how was he dragged out of the apartment? Could you describe it?
Yes. Well, who was dragged? Mr. Gordon was dragged out of the house?
Yes.
Yeah, they dragged him out of the front door, the entrance of the front door.
Did they drag him, like, did they grab him by his arms and drag him out? Did they grab him by his legs and drag him out? How was he dragged out of the apartment?
He was grabbed by his clothing and any other part of his body that could be grabbed.
Okay, while they were holding your pictures and your glass candle holder and lantern.
You know, and like I said, when they first walked in, my pictures were knocked off the wall. They grabbed the candle holder. The candle holder that came in and it went out with them.
Okay. And Mr. Gordon had that in his, I'm sorry, Mr. Fambro had that in his hand when he was dragging Mr. Gordon out of the apartment.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then the incident continued to occur outside the apartment. Where outside the apartment?
Right outside the door.
And at what point did you intervene outside the apartment?
I went when they actually dragged him out of the door, and I see them getting advantage of him. Basically, two men jumping one man using.
Have you
Okay.
finished the answer, Mr. Stroud? Because I heard two men jumping one man using.
A lantern.
Okay, thanks.
And when did you call 911?
As soon as I separated,
And did you have your phone on you or was it back in the house?
my phone was in my pocket.
Okay. Okay. And what physical injuries did you observe on Mr. Gordon after he was struck with a lantern multiple times?
I really cannot remember. Everything was kind of going so quickly with that situation. I remember when I called the 911, they asked, did he need an ambulance or whatever? They actually said that they was going to call out an ambulance to just make sure. They said they were going to take him to Grady to be checked for any injuries because he was saying it was hard for him to breathe.
Objection, motion to strike. A witness's testimony is hearsay, or witness's statement is hearsay.
Hearsay of the defendant?
No, hearsay of what the 911 operator told him. Was also non-responsive to the question.
Well, I'm not sure he's asserting the truth of what the 911 operator told him, but.
Well, he just testified that the 911 operator told him that he would send an ambulance and he would be transported to be Grady to be checked out.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, hang on. I'll sustain that objection and strike that testimony.
Mr. Stroud, did you observe any physical injuries from your own personal observations, what you saw on Mr. Gordon?
Yes, he had scratches and bruises.
Okay, he had bruises. When did you observe those bruises?
Actually, when we basically came in the house and after I separated them, I actually talked to them when the police came. We was trying to show him the injuries that he occurred. And at the same time, they seemed like they didn't care. They basically just went to another 911 call. Or they went to a call, but it was something else. But when they got there, it was well, I can't even really say that.
But you observed bruising.
Yes, ma'am.
How long after the incident did you observe those bruises?
Not even like 10 minutes.
Okay. And Mr. Stroud, do you have any medical training?
Do I have who?
Any medical training?
First aid, CPR.
Okay. Have you ever taken any classes or any training in how a bruise forms? I think you're frozen again, Mr. Stroud.
I can see
Oh,
him.
wait.
I think I can see him moving. Mr. Stroud, we are awaiting your answer to.
Raise your hand real high.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear
Yes.
you. Mr. Stroud, are you familiar with how a bruise forms?
Objection.
Ms. Hawkins, I believe your client had his hand up, and I would ask that we go forward unless you would like to stop and talk to him.
I think he has to use the restroom. However, I
No,
would
no,
witness testimony.
it's not about the bathroom. I can hold it, but I have an objection. Where's like why she asked a question
Miss
about
Mr. Gordon, I be objecting. Just calm down and listen.
All right, so just for the record,
relevance?
Mr. Gordon had his hand up. His counsel has explained to him that she handles objections. Ms. McCauley, please continue.
Stroud, would it be fair to say that a bruise is usually the result of broken capillaries that leak blood into the surrounding tissue, and it generally takes between 1 to 2 days for a bruise to form?
I'm going to object to that question because he did say that he didn't have, I don't think he has the medical training required to answer that question.
Sustained.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, any redirect, Ms. Hawkins?
Very briefly. On cross, the state asked you about Mr. Fambro holding a glass in his hand, or holding the glass candle lantern in his hand and dragging Mr. Gordon out. Was Mr. Fambro the only person dragging Mr. Gordon out of the apartment?
No, ma'am. At the time, it's Mr. Fountain and Mr. Fambros.
So Mr. Fambro was holding the glass in his one hand, using his other hand to pull on Mr. Gordon, while Mr. Fountain had both of his hands pulling on Mr. Gordon.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you were also asked, did you call the police when they kicked in your door down? Why didn't you call the police immediately when your door was kicked down?
Due to the point, they came straight in and basically started attacking Mr. Gordon, especially with the glass candle holder lantern. It was really kind of, it would seem like if I didn't put myself in the point of separating them, something serious could have happened, such as death or other major injuries. I felt it was my duty to actually separate them, then be able to call the police.
And did you call the police immediately after you separated them?
Yes, ma'am.
And the whole conversation about bruising, did you see injuries to Mr. Gordon's face, body, arms when this altercation eventually ended?
Yes, ma'am.
Whose blood did you see, or did you know whose blood you saw outside your door?
No, ma'am, I didn't.
Nothing further.
Any recross?
Just briefly, Your Honor, and this is a question I forgot to ask on direct. Mr. Stroud, how many times have you spoken with Mr. Gordon while he's been incarcerated at the Fulton County Jail?
How many times?
How many times?
I don't recall how many times, but I have spoken with him.
You've spoken with him maybe more than 10 times?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Your Honor, if I could have the ability to share my screen for just a moment. Mr. Stroud, Your phone number 678-651-4274.
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, before Ms. McCauley shares her screen, I'm going to object because I don't have the information that she's getting ready to present to the court.
Can you show it to, you are going to need, just as we would in the courtroom, if you're getting introduce a document, you will need to show it to Ms. Hawkins beforehand.
Ms. Hawkins, what I can do is I can send you a picture of what I'm about to show him.
Okay, that's fine for the purposes of me viewing it, but my objection is that it wasn't turned over in discovery. I don't have anything in discovery as it relates to jail calls.
I don't know that what's coming up is about jail calls, whether we suspect it is or not.
It is.
No. Okay. I'll give y'all a minute on this.
I received the document, Ms. McCauley. I guess I'll wait for your question before I object.
Okay. Mr. Stroud, would you say that you've spoken with Mr. Gordon more than 5 times?
Yes.
Okay. And have you spoken with him about your testimony in this case?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, thank you. Now, this witness may this witness be excused?
Yes, Judge. I have no further questions, Mr. Stroud. Since you've testified, you can stick around if you like, but you are excused.
Thank you.
Ms. McCauley?
The state would request that if Mr. Stroud is going to continue to participate in the hearing, that he be sequestered as any other witness would be. So.
I think the question is whether if he's, do you?
Oh, yeah, he's excused. He's excused. I don't need to say.
In that case, Mr. Stroud, we're going to ask you, I can either put you in a separate place for the Zoom teleconference, or you can just sign off. But I have instituted what's called the rule of sequestration. And in that case, since the case may go forward, I don't know anything right now. You might be needed in the future, so I'm going to ask you to sign off.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if we need you, then somebody can get in touch with you to get you back on. Thank you for your testimony. You're excused.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Hawkins, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes. Your Honor, I call Mr. Gordon, Mr. Ronaldo Gordon.
All right. Mr. Gordon, will you please raise your right hand, sir? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in the matter now pending before this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you. You can put your hand down. And if you would say your name for the record and spell it, please.
Ronaldo Gordon, RENALDO GORDON.
Okay. All right. Would you like to proceed, Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
I think I do need to just say to the defendant that he is under no obligation whatsoever to testify in this matter. And if he chooses to testify as called by his counsel, do you understand that you have the right not to testify, Mr. Gordon?
Yes.
You have the absolute right. Nobody can compel you to testify. And if you decide to go forward with your testimony, you really are the only one who can make that determination. And if you would like to testify, nobody can stop you. And if you're not a lawyer, and if you do not want to testify, nobody can make you. Do you understand that, sir?
Yes.
Do you want to testify?
Yes.
Okay, proceed, Ms. Hawkins.
Thank you, Judge. How are you doing this morning, Mr. Gordon?
I'm fine. You?
Good, thank you. How old are you?
I'm 30 years old.
When's your birthday?
June 29th, 1990.
And where are you originally from?
Tampa, Florida.
And how far did you go in school?
I graduated from Florida Agriculture and a Municipal University with a bachelor's degree in economics of business.
And when did you graduate from college?
2011.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the university again?
FAMU.
FAMU, okay.
And Mr. Gordon, do you have any children?
Yes, I have two daughters and a son.
And where do they live?
At this point in time, they're in Tampa, Florida with their aunt.
So is that your sister?
No, that's the mother of my children's sister.
Okay. Before you were arrested, where were you working?
Starbucks, Georgia Tech.
And what was your position there?
I was a barista.
Okay. And where were you living?
I was living with Mr. Darius Stroud at 806 Magnolia Way.
And how long had you been living there?
About a year, going on close to a year.
Okay. Where did you live previously?
Doraville, Georgia, Pleasantdale Road, and Shadow Lake Apartment.
With who?
Alone.
Okay. And on December 30th, 2019, were you living at 801 Magnolia Way?
Yes.
And who all lived at that location with you?
At the time, it was me, myself, Darius, and Keith.
Okay. And do you recall the evening of December 30th, 2019?
Yes.
What was significant about that evening?
It was a regular day. I was basically preparing myself for work the next day. We were discussing future goals and plans of moving from out of Magnolia and probably maybe getting a house in another part of town, and basically career advancements, and just having a regular conversation.
And do you know Kevin Fountain?
No, I had really just became acquainted with Mr. Fountain over the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Prior to December 30th, 2000.
Yes.
Okay. And do you know Conrad Fambro?
I became associated with him through Mr. Fountain.
Okay. And on December 30th, 2019, did you see Mr. Kevin Fountain?
No, not all that day until he came, bomb rushing in the house with a vendetta of some kind of his own.
Okay. So around what time did he come into the house?
It was maybe 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. It was really the 29th of September.
Okay.
But everything led up until the 30th, that early morning of September 30th.
Okay. Or September 30th or December 30th?
December 30th.
So on the evening of December 29th, 2019, Mr. Fountain comes to the apartment. When how do you know he's at the apartment?
Because Darius lets him in, and I can hear his voice in the hallway because I'm sitting on the couch and I can hear his voice, and he just comes in like talking and his usual self, amped up, and he comes in and like basically the whole room gets quiet because from our understanding, Kevin hadn't stopped talking to us. He didn't want to deal with us no more. We were all fake and we were full of drama, this and that. So none of us had Kevin's number. We wasn't talking to him. It was, our friendship was done, basically. And when he came, it was unexpected. We were all shocked, like, what do you want? Like, why are you here? Why are you even at our house? And from there, he just began to argue, like talking about we're fake and we're not
Objection, hearsay.
not hearsay.
Hang on,
Miss-
hang on.
Mr. Yes, Mr. Gordon,
Do you have a response to the hearsay objection?
I don't, Your Honor.
Then it's sustained, and don't, Mr. Gordon, don't say what other people said in your testimony, okay?
Can I say what he said?
No.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I mean, well, he just came in and I don't know, like I was quiet for a minute. And from there, we just went to, it was a verbal discussion. He was like, I don't know, he was getting mad because of what I was saying. And then I had my back turned towards him. So I'm talking to his friend and I'm telling her, like, what is the point of this? We're grown. He's mad because of what? And she stated to me, well, maybe he likes you. And
Okay,
well, I guess that's objection.
I mean, I
Objection.
do think that Mr. Gordon raises a fair point about, I can't say what he said. I mean, some of this there may be exceptions to, but not what the woman said that I've heard. So don't say what the woman said.
Okay. And, you know, as I'm talking, you know, he pushes me. And then I turn around, I don't do anything. I was just like, are you crazy? And then like, he's calling me a liar. Well, I don't even know how to even, I don't know how to, I'm just trying to give a description of what happened and what led
Just
to.
go ahead.
So yeah, he basically struck me first and we got into a physical altercation. Of course, I have to defend myself. I didn't know what he would do next. And different from what Darius said earlier, he actually pushed me and punched me. He didn't just push me, he actually punched me as well.
Okay.
Straight jab into the face.
Okay, Mr. Gordon, we're gonna break all this down.
Okay.
So Mr. Fountain comes into your apartment. Who does he walk in with?
Some girl, it's his friend, I don't know her.
You'd never seen her before?
No.
Okay, so Mr. Fountain and his female friend are in your apartment. You said he appears mad. You are sitting on the couch. Where does Fountain come in relation to you when he walks into the apartment?
He's, we're in the living room, so he's on the other side of the living room. I'm dead back center of the living room. Like he's more closer to the hallway, like standing in front of the TV, basically. And he's standing in front of our TV.
And was everyone watching the TV or was
No, the TV was off.
Okay. So Mr. Fountain comes and he's standing in front of the room, in the center of the room, correct?
Yes.
So at what point does he direct his conversation to you?
Like almost immediately it was because he was talking to Phil, he was arguing with Phil, the other guy, about something. And then I guess he saw me sitting over there, then it went to, and you, like type of situation, and you this and that, and he went into me. So I went to rebuttal, like, hold up, I don't got time for this. Like, this is petty. We're not gonna even talk about this. So almost immediately, I guess.
Okay. And at any point, does his position in the room change?
Yeah, he steps up and he takes off his shirt, like in combat mode, like he's ready to fight. He takes off his shirt and proceeds to continue to argue with me.
And what do you do?
Basically I just combat, like we argue. Not nothing physical yet. It hasn't gotten there. Neither one of us have even touched each other. And
I'm sorry, finish it. I thought you were finished.
And then I turn my back to him because I'm not afraid of you taking your shirt off. Like that doesn't, as long as you don't touch me, we're fine. So I direct my attention to his friend because she says she has input of what he's saying. Like maybe he likes you type of situation. So I'm like, I don't care. So I'm talking to her. And then that's when I feel him push me. And then I turn around and then he hits me.
And what do you do in response to him hitting you?
We fight. I throw punches.
Does he throw punches?
He throws a couple, and I guess, I won basically because Darius separates us. He separates us. He comes in between us. He pushes me in the room, and he tells Kevin to leave. Kevin's still trying to, get to me, but you see how big Darius is, so he can't get around Darius to get to me, and he pushes me in the room and holds the door closed, and then he pushes Darius. He pushes Kevin Fountain out of the house.
Okay. So at this point, you all are no longer fighting. You're in the room.
Yes.
Mr. Fountain is gone.
Yes.
What happens while Mr. Fountain is gone?
Darius comes into the room and he tells me, just calm down, you're just getting out of a situation. You don't need any more of this. Calm down. So I'm like, okay, you're right. I sit on the couch, I light a cigarette, and I'm calming down. I'm like, okay, that was crazy. It shouldn't even got to that point. Then out of nowhere, the front door get kicked in. Like I can hear it. It wasn't like someone just pushed the door in. I can hear the boom. And then next thing I know, I hear Mr. Conrad Fambro stating, "Who hit my man? Who hit my man? Who hit my man?" And as I look, it's him, Mr. Kevin, and then the other girl, the girl that he came with, was behind Kevin in the hallway. And Mr. Conrad, Kennard Fambro, whatever his name is, he grabs the vase or lantern, whatever you want to call it, off of the counter, and he raises it and tries to hit me. I don't even know if he hit me, to be honest, like, because I try to block it, but I know he's trying to come down and hit me with it. And I'm trying to block that, and I'm trying to keep Kevin from hitting me. Kevin's punching me. Bernard's hitting me. I hear Darius telling me to stop. I hear the dog barking. I hear Darius try to stop the dog from attacking them. And then it just like, everything was like a blur because they went to pull in. I feel scratches, I feel punches. And the whole time I'm trying to throw punches and kicks or whatever to get them off of me. And they're dragging me out the front door.
When Kevin Fountain and Conrad Fambro and this young lady come back, were they invited?
Nope. They weren't even invited the first time.
Did you know that they would come back after?
Had no idea.
Ended? You got to let me finish my sentence.
Oh, I'm sorry.
After the first altercation ended, did you know that they were coming back?
No, I didn't.
When you were fighting Mr. Fambro and Mr. Fountain off, what objects, if any, did you grab to get them off of you?
No, I didn't even have time to try to grab anything. I was using my hands to get them off of me. I had no weapon or anything.
And did you provoke Mr. Fountain?
No.
Did you provoke Mr. Fambro?
No.
Who called the police?
Darius.
Did the police arrive?
Yes.
When the police arrived, where were you?
I was back in the house when they arrived.
Okay. Where was Mr. Fountain and Mr. Fambro?
They ran. I guess they were down the street home or wherever they were.
Okay.
I know they left the scene.
Okay. And During the altercation, the fight, the pulling, the tugging, the punching, the trying to get them off of you, do you remember biting Mr. Fountain's ear?
I don't remember biting Mr. Fountain's ear. I know that Mr. Fountain was holding my arms and I bit, like I was trying to get him off of me and I bit something. I didn't know what I bit, but I know that it was out of distress. I was trying to get him off of me and he would not let my arms go. Because while he's holding my arms, Kennard is hitting me.
So there's two grown men on you.
Yes.
And they have your hands and arms down. Are they on the floor?
No, we're standing up and he's holding my arms behind my back.
So your arms are behind your back. You're
Yes.
sitting on your 2 feet.
Yes.
You have no other, or I'm sorry. The only other options that you have available to you is your mouth.
Is my head and my whole entire head. Basically, I was trying to headbutt or whatever I could, and none of it was working.
And why were you using your head and your mouth or?
Because my arms were being held.
Nothing further.
All right, any cross-examination?
I'm talking, Your Honor, but I'm on mute. Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Gordon.
Morning.
Mr. Gordon, you said you're 30 years old, correct?
Yes.
You have a college degree from Florida A&M?
Yes.
Okay. And you moved up to Georgia when?
2017.
2017. And just for the record, you were convicted of larceny out of Leon County, Florida in 2016, correct?
Yes.
Okay, you're a convicted felon?
In Florida.
Objection, asked and answered.
Well, I don't know that larceny in Florida is a felony. So I don't think that part of it has been asked or answered. So overruled.
Mr. Gordon, you can go ahead and answer.
Well, from my understanding, in Florida it's a misdemeanor and in Georgia it's a misdemeanor.
That's your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we can't show evidence, so, but that's your understanding. That's fine. I'll take it up with a proffer. Mr. Gordon, how long were you living with Mr. Stroud?
Maybe a year, 10, 11 months.
10, 11 months. And you said that just before this incident had occurred, that your social group had cut off contact with Mr. Fountain. Is that accurate?
Well, he cut off contact with us.
He cut off contact with y'all. But you didn't have his phone number anymore?
No.
Okay.
We were blocked.
Do you know if Mr. Stroud had his phone number?
He was blocked.
Okay. Do you know that because you saw Mr. Fountain's phone where it had blocked numbers, or are you just saying that out of speculation?
Via social media, you can see who blocks you, and when we have tried to call Mr. Fountain. Well, Darius tried to call Mr. Fountain, and it's blocked. You can tell it's blocked. It's going straight to voicemail.
Okay.
And such and such.
So Mr. Fountain showed up to the residence on Magnolia Way.
Yes.
And Mr. Stroud met him at the door, correct?
Yes.
You did not meet him at the door?
No.
Okay. And Mr. Stroud at that point invited him into the apartment?
Yes.
Okay. And there was a young lady that was with them that you did not know?
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Fountain came into the apartment. He was very angry. That would be a fair statement?
He had a feel of aggression.
Okay. And he first started talking to Phil.
Yes.
And then he started talking to you.
Yes.
So when he came into the apartment, he was overall upset. He wasn't upset with a specific person. Would that be a fair statement?
I feel that it was, yes, overall,
Okay.
of the entire social circle.
Okay. And a verbal altercation ensued. First, it kind of seemed like it was with Phil, and then it was directed to you. Would that be accurate?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, the physical altercation between the two of you escalated when Mr. Fountain put his hands on you, whether it was a push or a punch, but that's when the physical altercation occurred.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Stroud intervened and put you in a bedroom and put Mr. Fountain outside the apartment.
Yes.
Okay. And at some point you left the bedroom and went back and you were sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette.
Yes.
Okay. And then Mr. Fountain and Mr. Fambro came in through the front door.
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Fambro was actually the one who kind of initiated the physical altercation before Mr. Fountain.
It was both of them.
It was both of them. Okay.
And
the physical altercation occurred first inside the apartment and then it escalated outside the apartment?
The whole thing was the apartment outside. It was no stopping between. They grabbed me and drugged me.
Okay, stopping. So you weren't struck inside the apartment first?
Yes.
And then
you were struck inside? First. Yes. Okay.
So it didn't completely take place outside the apartment. It started inside and continued outside.
Yes.
Okay. You said, I think I actually wrote this down as a quote, that everything is kind of a blur to you as to what was going on.
Yes, that's what it feels like in a fight.
Okay. And you were fighting Mr. Fambro and Mr. Fountain, correct?
They were fighting me.
Okay. But you were defending yourself, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you defended yourself by biting Mr. Fountain?
I defended myself by using my hands at first, and then when I was being held against my will, I used whatever tactics I could get out of the situation.
Did you try to kick anyone?
Yes, it didn't work.
Okay. But biting Mr. Fountain worked?
Yes.
And you bit his ear off?
I don't know about bit ear off or nothing like that. I don't know what I bit.
Okay. So you don't know what you did?
No, I don't know what I bit. I know I bit, but I don't know what it was.
Okay. And you were then, after the police were called, they came to that location, and then they went to look for Mr. Fambro and Mr. Fountain, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then they came back?
Yes.
And at that point, you had an altercation with Officer Kirk, is that correct?
Never had an altercation. There's body cam footage.
Okay, so
altercation. I was basically illegally detained out of my home. I was lied to by the officers when they came to the front door. He said, "I need you to identify the suspects." And I had no shoes on and I was comfortable in my home. And he lied to me and told me to come and talk to him outside and then grab me and put me in handcuffs. Illegal.
Okay. So, well, we're not talking about the legality of what happened, but you were arrested by Officer Kirk, correct?
I was what?
You were arrested by Officer Kirk, correct?
No, I was arrested by Officer Torres Griffey.
Okay, but Officer Kirk was there.
Officer Kirk isn't even in my discovery as the arresting officer. He was trying to help me. He asked Miss Officer Torres Griffey, "Why are we arresting him? He's the victim." Torres Griffey told him to move out the way. I got this situation.
And at which point did you begin spitting at the police officers?
Never. Body cam footage. Never.
Okay.
I would like to request body cam footage.
So, Mr. Gordon, it's your testimony that you never spit at the police officers?
No.
You never became aggressive with the police officers?
No.
You never said that you wanted to be killed by the police officers?
That was during the precinct, and that was after over 200-300 times stating that I was the victim and I was being illegally detained. That was over 2 or 3 times of a calm demeanor. Then I got emotional because I'm asking them, like, okay, so what if someone kicks your door and what would you do? And they tell me I would shoot them. And so I'm like, so why am I being arrested? That was after.
Is there any way that I could talk?
Mr. Fountain, I need you to go back into the breakout room.
All right, yeah, because no one never kicked through no door.
Mr. Fountain?
Mr. Fountain is on this call and not in the breakout room, as was specifically represented, I want him back off of this call right now. How long has he been on?
I just noticed him, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I just noticed that I saw when someone entered because the screen changed. I don't
know. Off right now. If he's not on, if I'm still seeing his tile.
So how did our pictures and stuff get knocked off the wall?
Mr. Gordon, I need you to be quiet, please.
Okay. So.
All right, he appears to be gone now. How long was he in?
I noticed him after I asked the question to Mr. and I was watching Mr. Gordon's response. And then I said, Mr. Fountain, can you please go to the breakout room?
Ms. Hawkins, do you have any idea how long he was on?
I feel like he was on longer than that. But like I said, Your Honor, when we're on Zoom, the tiles change when people enter and leave. And I did notice that the layout changed a little bit. I didn't acknowledge who entered because I was focused on what was going on. But I did notice the layout changed prior to Ms. McCauley asking that last question.
All right, Ms. McCauley, let me ask you one more time and then let's move on. How long do you think Mr. Fountain was on?
I think maybe 30 seconds of Mr. Gordon's last part of his answers when I noticed the tiles shift. And that's when I said Mr. Fountain needed to go to the breakout room.
All right. Okay, would you continue your questioning, please?
Sure. Mr. Gordon, actually, I think that was the last question that I had, Your Honor, was about his interactions with Officer Kirk. So I'm finished.
Okay, any redirect?
Mr. Gordon, at any point, did you initiate any interaction with Mr. Fountain?
No.
Did you initiate any interaction with Mr. Fambro?
No.
When they entered your home, who invited them?
No one.
When your hands were behind your back and you were continuously still being hit, you said you used your mouth and your head.
Yeah.
And how many times did it take you using your teeth to stop Mr. Fambro and Mr. Fountain from attacking you?
Once.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Any recross on that, Ms. McCauley?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, any more witnesses, Ms. Hawkins?
Your Honor, the defense rests.
Thank you. Ms. McCauley?
Yes, Your Honor, the state would move at this time for the court to make a finding that the defense has not made a prima facie case as to self-defense in this particular instance. Since the defense has closed with their evidence, it is appropriate for the court to make such a ruling before the state presents their witnesses.
Any response, Ms. Hawkins?
Yes, Your Honor. The law requires the defense to make a prima facie case of justification, which according to Hudson v. State 325 GA App 657, and that's a 2014 case, citing Williams v. State 298 GA App 151, and on page 153, and that is a 2009 case, it requires a showing that the victim was the aggressor, the victim assaulted the defendant, and the defendant was honestly trying to defend himself. Your Honor, based on the testimony of both Mr. Gordon and Mr. Stroud, the alleged victim, who is Mr. Kevin Fountain, because he's the only named victim in the indictment, he was the aggressor. he did assault the defendant, and the defendant testified that he honestly was trying to defend himself. He bit one time, and that one time stopped the threat. And the only reason why he bit was because his hands were behind his back and he was being held down by his aggressors. So I believe that I have made a prima facie case.
All right, any response from, any rebuttal from the state?
Yes, Your Honor. The state would argue that the statements of Mr. Stroud and Mr. Gordon are inconsistent. There is some glaring obvious differences in their testimony. First being how the altercation initially occurred. Mr. Stroud testified that Mr. Fountain came into the apartment and directly started started confronting Mr. Gordon. Mr. Gordon's own testimony is that Mr. Fountain came into the apartment and started a verbal altercation with Mr. Phil, and then that transferred over to Mr. Gordon, which it.
Carly, slow down just a little bit.
Of course, I'm sorry, Samantha. At that point, Mr.
Mr. Fountain came into the apartment and started verbally
aggressing Ms. Phillip as opposed to Mr. Gordon, and then transferred that verbal altercation to Mr. Gordon, at which point he escalated it by standing up and saying he didn't have enough time for that nonsense. And then they ensued into a verbal altercation, which became a physical altercation. There's a difference in the testimonies between what happened during the second altercation. Mr. Stroud stated that Mr. Fountain and Mr. Fambro came into the apartment and started hitting Mr. Gordon with a glass candle, which then turned into a lantern. And then the altercation continued to occur outside. Mr. Gordon's testimony was that they came into the apartment and then dragged him immediately outside and started hitting him. Mr. Gordon's testimony was also, or Mr. Stroud's testimony was that he did not see the physical altercation resulting in Mr. Gordon biting Mr. Fountain's ear outside, but that he observed the entire altercation in between calling the police and attempting to separate the parties. And Mr. Gordon's testimony was that he was being held back with his arms, and the only thing he could use was his head and his mouth to defend himself, at which point he started biting. Mr. Fountain did not know that he was biting Mr. Fountain's ear. And Your Honor, as the indictment clearly states, that Mr. Gordon bit Mr. Fountain's ear off, which would be a significant injury, which would be a significant incident. The fact that the defendant won't admit to that, I think, is indicative of a lack of a prima facie case of self-defense. He has not, in fact, admitted that he bit the victim's ear off.
Okay. All right. At this point, the court denies the state's motion for a finding of no prima facie case. Would you like to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, and I'm going to need a minute to get my witnesses back on the line. I don't know where they went.
So one at a time.
Pardon me? Yes, well, they're in the same room, unfortunately.
Okay.
And Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. I think there's no way that we can, with it being a Zoom call, there's no way that we can ensure that they're not listening to each other's testimony. They're in the same room. We're at least in the same place.
We're going to bring one at a time out of the room.
Well, no, they're physically in the same room together, Judge. They live together.
But, well, they could be sitting together in the hall. Were we at the courthouse, they can come out one at a time and testify.
No, that is very true, Your Honor. But at the same time, there's a better way to ensure that they're not conferring their testimony. They're not talking. They're sitting in the same room right now. So if I was sitting in the same room with someone else, they can hear everything that I'm saying, and then they come and they testify and they've heard everything that I've said. It's not like
one comes out at a time. One comes out of the breakout room at a time.
Judge,
Yeah.
Judge, they're
in the same house.
They're together, like sitting on the couch together.
Oh, well, then make one go into another room. I mean, this is the way we chose to move forward. There's a solution for this. One at a time on the camera, and the other one goes into to another room and the one testifies under oath that the other's in the other room.
The other option I could propose would be that if the court wanted to set this down for an in-person hearing for the remainder of the state's testimony.
I don't know why we would put the defendant at the disadvantage of having his witness appear via Zoom. He's the one who's waived the confrontation clause. Let's go forward. I mean,
You're trying to get them back.
let y'all agree. If y'all agree to, if y'all agree to take these other two witnesses up in person, we can do that. But I do want to consider other things. What, Ms.
I understand. Your Honor, I would just ask that maybe one of them can step outside of the apartment or house, or while the other one remains inside. I think that would satisfy me.
I'm trying to get them back on the call, Your Honor.
Okay. They're not in the breakout room?
No.
Okay. Yeah, one is in a breakout room. Kevin
Okay.
Campbell is in a
Let me
breakout
go back to the breakout room.
While she's doing that in courtroom 2, is the deputy there so I could tell him that we're not going to need Miss Spencer?
She's actually out here in Union City. We're not gonna need her.
No, they've come up with a consent bond, so we're not going to have to go forward with her. So she can go back to.
What is her bond so I can inform her?
It's going to be a 75,000 sign-on bond to pretrial.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Thank you.
South Annex, thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all.
And thank you so much for doing this so quickly for us.
And I'm going to try to work on it while we're in court, but that usually does not work. My Odyssey doesn't like to work when I'm in Zoom. So
I'm sure just as long as she knows she'll be going home, she'll be all right.
okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Is that it for you, Kelsey?
Yes, I was just about to ask if I could be excused.
Hi, Kelsey.
No, you should sit and listen.
As fun as this has been, Jamie, I think y'all got it. So everybody have a good weekend. Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Do the same.
Bye, Ms. Connor. Thank you. Kathy, could you check your text, please?
Oh,
Assuming I texted you, which I meant.
I got the text, Judge.
don't make me cough.
I was just joking.
I think so, but let me look if I can look.
Can we go off the record, Samantha, until they come back in?
Yes, that's fine.
Kathy? Just stay far away, okay, Kathy?
I thought it was muted.
Yeah,
Okay.
don't cough into that microphone.
Can we go off YouTube too, Judge, or is that?
Okay.
That's